Deshaun Watson walked past the media yesterday without saying a word. No statement. No carefully managed deflection designed to keep his name relevant while revealing nothing. Just silence. And I've been around enough quarterback competitions to know that silence at this specific moment, inside this specific evaluation window, is not nothing. It is information. When real competitive pressure is bearing down on every person in that building, when a coaching staff is watching everything and accumulating the evaluative impressions that shape franchise decisions for years, the choice to disengage from a moment rather than claim it is itself a form of communication. Watson said something yesterday without opening his mouth. And the people inside that Cleveland building received that message clearly. Let me give you the full picture of what is actually happening in this competition, because the version most people are consuming is operating at the surface level when the genuinely important dynamics are running considerably deeper. Todd Monken did not come to Cleveland to manage a transitional quarterback situation. He came to build something specific, with a specific offensive philosophy and a specific kind of player at the center of it. Every roster move his staff has made this offseason has been quietly encoding that vision for anyone willing to read it carefully rather than just react to the headline. Watson going silent at the precise moment when a competitor with genuine hunger for this job would have stepped forward and made some kind of claim on the situation in front of him. That is not a minor detail in understanding where this competition is heading. Let me tell you what Shedeur Sanders is doing in contrast, because I think this distinction matters more than almost anything else in evaluating how this eventually resolves. The reports coming out of that facility consistently describe a quarterback approaching each day with the kind of focused urgency that cannot be manufactured for an audience and switched off when the cameras leave. He is not performing work. He is doing it, locked into the preparation process in a way the coaching staff observes and accumulates as evidence across every single day of evaluation. In competitions where the margin between two players is narrow enough that it cannot be resolved purely through on-field performance, the competitor who is visibly moving toward the pressure has a real and durable advantage over the one managing his distance from it. One player in this building is leaning into the discomfort of being evaluated every day. The other walked past the media without a word. You do not need an official depth chart to interpret what that contrast communicates to the people whose professional responsibility is forming an accurate assessment of both of them. Now I want to talk about what Monken's receiver additions tell us about the offensive architecture being constructed in Cleveland, because this is the piece the broader conversation has not fully processed. When Monken described Denzel Boston, the language he used was not accidental, and it was not the generic praise coaches offer when discussing any new addition to the roster. Size, matchup difficulty, red zone presence, a player who loves to practice, who has competed consistently, whose trajectory has been upward, those are not words you reach for when adding a player without a clear vision for how he fits inside a system. That is an offensive mind, and Monken's entire professional identity was built around coordinating offenses at the highest level before this head coaching opportunity, describing a specific kind of target engineered for a specific kind of quarterback operation. A large-framed receiver who creates matchup problems in the red zone, who demands safety attention that pulls coverage away from the spacing elsewhere in the formation, requires a quarterback who can recognize that alignment, process where the advantage has been created, and deliver the ball on time before the coverage recovers. That is a timing-based operation. That is a quarterback who trusts his receivers to win their individual battles and commits to the throw on schedule rather than holding the ball while waiting for something more obvious to develop. That profile fits Shedeur Sanders in a specific and non-generic way. His game is built around processing speed and decision rhythm. He sees the field quickly, reads coverage accurately, and delivers the ball to the location the route concept designates before the window closes. That is not a style that accommodates improvisation as its primary operating mode. It is a style that requires genuine system mastery, because the timing-based delivery only works when the quarterback's internal clock is synchronized with the route structure his receivers are running. And it is exactly the style that Monken's language around Boston suggests he is designing for. A receiver who creates size mismatches in the red zone is most dangerous when the quarterback is processing to him efficiently on time. If the quarterback habitually extends plays and searches for improvised solutions rather than trusting the design, that matchup advantage gets wasted because the route has broken down long before the ball arrives. Watson's game runs in the opposite direction, and this is important to understand clearly and without sentimentality. His natural orientation as a quarterback, even before the injuries accumulated and the career complications mounted, was toward extension and improvisation. When the design play didn't produce an immediate answer, Watson's instinct was to create outside the structure using his physical gifts. That produces spectacular individual moments. It also produces the holding penalties and turnovers and offensive identity inconsistency that makes it genuinely difficult to build the systematic week-to-week execution that a head coach whose stated philosophy is about winning rather than just scoring is trying to establish as the organizational standard. Monken is not building an improvisation-based offense. He is building a rhythm and timing operation. And the quarterback best suited to execute that operation is not the one who walked silently past the media yesterday. Casey Concepcion tells the same architectural story from a different angle. Quick, sharp, reliably separating on short and intermediate routes, the specific receiver profile that becomes most dangerous in a system where the quarterback processes quickly and releases the ball decisively on timing. You do not add two receivers with these specific and complementary profiles without a clear vision for how they function together inside the offensive identity you are constructing. Concepcion's value comes from creating underneath and intermediate separation that opens Boston's red zone matchups on the back end of the formation. Both of them require a quarterback who sees the field quickly, trusts the routing concepts, and gets the ball out with the timing and placement those routes are designed around. Monken has been building this deliberately, acquisition by acquisition, and the architectural logic points consistently toward the same conclusion about who is at the center of the offense being assembled in Cleveland. Monken's developmental philosophy reveals something else important, and it's embedded in how he talked about what this coaching staff's responsibility to its players actually is. He was direct about it. The job of coaches is to develop the players in the building, to push each individual toward the genuine ceiling of their capability rather than simply managing what they currently are and extracting whatever performance is available in the short term. That is a philosophical statement about orientation, and when you place that philosophy inside the context of a live quarterback competition, it reveals where this coaching staff's genuine developmental energy is actually directed. A veteran quarterback at Watson's current career stage is not, by any honest definition, a developmental project. He is a completed professional product operating with a decade of ingrained habits built across thousands of professional repetitions that are not going to be substantially reshaped by a new coaching environment in a new system. What he provides is operational familiarity, the ability to run a professional offense at a functional level without requiring foundational teaching. What he cannot provide is the thing Monken was describing, which is a player whose ceiling is genuinely unresolved, who is still in the active process of becoming the full version of what he can be, and who can be shaped by real coaching investment into something meaningfully greater than his current form. Shedeur Sanders is that player. He is young enough and talented enough and intellectually equipped enough to absorb a new system with a speed that genuinely exceeds what his raw experience level would predict. A coaching staff that defines its identity around developing players is not making that statement with Watson in mind. It is describing its relationship with a young quarterback who is still being built. The offensive line situation adds a dimension to this conversation I want to address directly, because Monken was honest about the fact that the center position remains an open question being actively worked through. That honesty is itself informative about how this staff operates. They are not covering the gaps in this roster with confident language. They are acknowledging the gaps while actively working to resolve them, which tells you the organization is building in real time around a long-term vision rather than assembling the most palatable short-term version of the roster. And in that context, which quarterback actually fits this specific situation right now is a consequential question that isn't being asked with enough precision in most of the surrounding conversation. Interior pressure, particularly pressure arriving unexpectedly through the center gap, creates a very specific kind of disruption for quarterbacks. It comes from the direction the passer is already facing. It collapses the internal timing of the drop and weight transfer. It forces compressed decisions earlier than the route concept was designed to require. A quarterback who processes quickly and releases on timing is significantly better equipped to operate behind a line with interior uncertainty than one whose model requires extended time in the pocket for the designed structure to develop or for improvised solutions to materialize after the structure breaks down. Watson's tendency to hold and extend actually increases his exposure behind a line that cannot consistently provide clean interior pockets, because the extension creates more time for penetrating linemen to find him. Shedeur's processing speed and timing-based delivery mean the ball is often already gone before the pressure arrives to disrupt him. That is not a marginal advantage in this specific situation. It is a structural one. Monken's most revealing public comment across all of his recent statements came when he discussed the shift in thinking that separates being an offensive coordinator from being a head coach. As a coordinator, he said, you are responsible for scoring points. As a head coach, you are responsible for winning football games. Those are not the same objective, and the gap between them is wider than it might initially appear. Scoring puts numbers on the board. Winning requires consistency of decision-making under real pressure. The ability to protect the football in the moments when protecting it matters more than manufacturing a big play. The situational judgment to take the controlled correct decision when the spectacular incorrect one is also available, and the systemic execution that allows a team to be competitive week after week rather than brilliant some weeks and catastrophically undisciplined others. That philosophy demands a specific kind of quarterback. A quarterback who plays within the structure, who makes the intelligent decision rather than the spectacular one, who understands that sustained systematic execution across a full season produces more wins than the individual highlights that dominate the conversation but do not consistently show up in the final score. Watson has never been, even in his elite years before everything complicated his career, a quarterback whose game was built around systematic discipline within structure. He was a playmaker, an improviser, a quarterback whose individual brilliance frequently produced moments nobody else in the league could produce. That is a real and genuine form of excellence, and I am not diminishing what he was at his peak. But it is not what Monken described when he articulated his philosophy as a head coach. The commitment to winning over scoring, to disciplined execution over spectacular improvisation, is a commitment to a different quarterback identity entirely. And Shedeur Sanders embodies that identity in his operational framework more completely than Watson ever has, or is likely to now. What I keep returning to when I sit with all of this together is how many separate threads are telling exactly the same story. The roster construction communicates who the offense is being designed around. The developmental philosophy communicates where the coaching staff's genuine investment is directed. The philosophical distinction between scoring and winning communicates what kind of quarterback this system needs at its center. And Watson's silence communicated something about his relationship with this competition that no amount of subsequent press conference performance is going to fully overwrite in the minds of the coaches who observed that moment and processed what it meant. These are not isolated data points that can be explained away individually. They are a pattern, and patterns in football evaluation are more reliable than any single piece of evidence because they accumulate across time in ways that individual moments cannot. Shedeur Sanders did not need Watson to disengage to build his case for this starting job. He was already building it through the daily accumulation of evidence, through visible engagement with every part of the competitive process, through the quality of preparation that a coaching staff committed to genuine evaluation notices and records across weeks of real observation. Watson's silence just removed the possibility that the contrast between them could be obscured by a veteran competitor's experience at managing competitive impressions through strategically visible moments of engagement. What Watson showed in that silence was his actual relationship with this competition right now. What Shedeur is showing every day is his. The coaching staff is watching both with clear eyes and drawing exactly the conclusions the evidence warrants. The formal announcement of what has already been decided inside that building is the only thing still pending. Everything else has already been settled by the players themselves.